Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Something completely different to start our September off. Christopher Scalia is the author of this book, 13 novels conservatives will love, parens, but probably haven't read. Christopher is a senior fellow in Social, Cultural, and Constitutional Studies Department at the American Enterprise Institute. He's a recovering English professor, and he joins me. Congratulations on 13 novels, Christopher. It's fabulous. When and how did you decide to take on this project?
Thank you, Hugh. That means a lot. And thank you for having me on. I've been wanting to take on this project or something like it for some time, just because, you know, when you speak to conservatives about fiction they like because it expresses conservative values or ideas, we tend to talk about the same handful of books. And most of those books are very good. I'm thinking of Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited, or 1984 by George Orwell, Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe, or even Lord of the Rings. These are great books, but we're so focused on that small selection, I think we've lost sight of kind of the great literary tradition that's at our disposal. And I wanted to make readers a little bit more aware of that by introducing them to novels, English language originals that go back from the 18th century to the present day, to show them that it's possible for great fiction to deal with important ideas and themes of particular relevance and importance to conservatives.
Now, I was impressed, Christopher, originally by your blurbs. Christine Rosen, Andrew Ferguson, Jessica Hooten-Wilson, Matt Continetti, John Miller, Peter Robinson. You know, what they all have in common is serious intellect and good humor, which is actually quite a calling card for a novelist or a literary writer, to be able to draw in people who have got great intelligence and good humor, because that's what one can then expect in the book. Is there anyone that got away that you wanted a blurb?
Well, Hugh, I should have gone to you, of course, but
Oh no, I'm not. I'm not a fiction reader. That's why I found this so interesting. I'm a nonfiction guy who gets a thriller in the summer. And I've only read 3 of your 13, which are My Antonia by Willa Cather, Scoop by Waugh, and then Peace Like a River by Engler. And we'll talk about those 3 in a second segment. But let's cover the big challenge, getting anyone to read anything. Because we live in the Potter generation, and it seems like a lot of our kids read Potter and stop.
Yes, and I don't think there's anything wrong with reading Harry Potter, but especially millennials, I guess, and maybe Zoomers now, that's kind of the end of things, because they're so entranced by that. And it really should just be an introduction to other great books and great literature. It can be challenging, I say this as a parent, to get children to read. I'm struggling with that myself, and I think to a degree it just requires patience. But it's also difficult because I think there are so many things apart from books that we can be doing, that children can be doing, that we can be doing. And the numbers show that we're doing a lot of things other than reading. The National Endowment for the Arts in the early 80s did a survey and found that about 56% of Americans reported having read a work of literature in the previous year for fun. These days, that number is more like 36%, so close to a 20% drop. And the problem is, it's not that the internet is necessarily bad and everything we're doing on it is unhealthy for us, but we lose a lot when we lose reading in general and fiction in particular. And we need to hold on to the benefits of reading fiction that I go into in my introduction, such as developing what's called our sympathetic or moral imagination, our ability to understand people who don't think or live as we do. And without
I want
fiction,
to run down the 7. There are 7 things you cited in the introduction as reasons to read the 13 books. But I did want to start by telling, don't feel bad if you're not a reader. Christopher disarms the audience by quoting James Shapiro, who's a Shakespeare scholar at Columbia. I'm glad to know they have Shakespeare scholars at Columbia, Christopher, who said, I'm reading 100 websites, I'm listening to podcasts. He went from 5 novels a month to 1. And that's obviously a literature addict, right?
Yes.
It's not like this is the whole country hasn't become dumb. We've become preoccupied with other things.
That's exactly right. And I should say, you said you had read 3 of these novels. It's a pretty good number. one of my fears with this book is that I'm making people feel guilty for not having read these books. In fact, I hadn't read many of them before I started work on this project. These are just books, many of them were books I had heard about and been meaning to read for a long time, but really hadn't had the time or reason to get to them until I was working on this project. But you're absolutely right. It's not just people who don't generally read or who aren't professional readers who struggle with this. Even college professors at important colleges struggle with this as well.
Let me run down the reasons to read. Great fiction is a source of beauty, and beauty is good. Great fiction is a source of truth, but per Emily Dickinson's advice, truth told slant. Number 2, you quote my friend John Agresto. While our books may not make us more humane, they can surely show us and lead us to think about all aspects, high and low, of our humanity. Number 3, from Russell Kirk, a moral obligation to normality from authors is what he expects. That is, explicitly or implicitly involved. 4, being a better citizen can flow from fiction. 5, from Ralph Ellison, fiction provides visions of ideal democracy. Anthony Trollope, of all people's number 6, gesture towards things as they should be. And then the big surprise, President Obama, provoke and shape democratic engagement and do it with empathy. Those are 7 excellent reasons. Eugene, has anyone said no? Or Christopher, has anyone said no? I'm going to call you by your brother's name a few times.
That's okay. I'm in good company there. I think, obviously some people are skeptical about these. I mean, there is unfortunately kind of a powerful Philistine presence, especially among tech bros, who say that, you really shouldn't need to read anything more than 200 pages, and that all reading is just for gleaning factual information. But there are different sources of wisdom apart from nonfiction, and fiction is a great testament to that. Fiction allows us an insight into human nature that I think is just more engaging and more entertaining than nonfiction often is, though of course not always. I know I'm speaking to a big nonfiction fan here. And I do think conservative men in particular just prefer nonfiction to fiction for that reason.
Hard facts.
Yeah, hard facts. Fiction just seems less serious. It seems frivolous. And, historically speaking, that hasn't been the case. And some of the greatest minds of Western civilization have expressed their ideas and crafted their art through the novel.
And it's very rare that anyone will say a nonfiction book impacted them for life, but I'll bet you there are more than a few people walking around who read Bonfire of the Vanities and still remember the Favor Bank and the character. Yeah. That's 35 years old, but One Day in the Life of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. These are books read long ago, but they leave a mark. I'm coming right back with Christopher Scalia. The new book is 13 novels conservatives will love but probably haven't read. I'm not going to read you the list of 13, but we're going to talk about 3 and why each of them matters a little bit. So don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Christopher Scalia will be back. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Hope you had a great Labor Day weekend. As promised, Christopher Scalia is back. He joined me in the first hour, part 2 now here. His brand new book is 13 novels conservatives will love but probably haven't read. You ought to go and find 13 novels conservatives will love but probably haven't read and get it for yourself and find out where to start. I was happy that I had read at least 3 of them. I was prepared not to have read any of them because I'm a nonfiction guy. But let's start with the first one I was glad to see, My Antonia by Willa Cather. I compliment, Christopher, your approach of enough bio to make the author accessible. I didn't know anything about that. I've read this book probably 50 years ago. I think, no, 22, maybe 48 years ago. And she wins a Pulitzer in 1923. You quote all the people that love her, Lionel Trilling, Joseph Epstein, whose work I admire so much and in whose footsteps you are following. How would you explain how it's a novel of both immigration and the spirit of the age?
Well, it's a wonderful novel that I think celebrates the American dream as it's made available to both native-born Americans and immigrants. The title character, My Antonia, is a new arrival to the United States. Her family comes, they go to Nebraska, and they really struggle there. But Antonia after her own serious struggles, finds great success by starting a big family of her own. And I think I love that novel in part because towards the end there's a great depiction of this enormous family, happy big family, which you don't get very often in fiction. I love that. But her story
Anthony is. I'm going to bring up the narrator is Jim, and
yes,
someone with whom Jim is traveling. So they provide the frame, and I had forgotten a lot of this, but immediately comes back. You think that's a good test of a novel if you haven't
oh,
read it in a long
absolutely,
time? And yeah,
yeah. No,
immediately it comes back.
I think that's absolutely right. And we remember, Joseph Epstein writes about this. Often we don't remember plots of novels, but we remember the characters. We kind of remember the general sensation or impression we have of a novel. That's a good sign. Jim Burden is the other character who's kind of the manifestation of the American dream in this novel. He's an orphan who moves from Virginia to Nebraska. He too experiences some trouble. But he also is kind of the emblem of the American dream in that he gets a great education, has great success in business, and he has that success, Cather makes clear, because he loves America. He's a lawyer for the railroad company, and he has his success in that capacity because he loves the landscape, he loves America, and that kind of drives him to this great success. So these two central characters are very different backgrounds, and have different degrees of happiness, but they are both emblems of what we now call the American dream and what's possible to people who are resilient and work hard.
This audience loves Hillsdale College, so I want to include the fact that Bradley Berzer of Hillsdale calls Cather, quote, the most American of American authors. Having just finished the brand new giant book on Twain, I'm glad to see at least there's a runner-up for someone other than Twain. I don't think Willa Cather will be getting the full-on bio that many authors get, but she's a fabulous writer. Let me move on to the unusual one, which I'd forgotten I'd read. It's only from 2001. Is it Leaf Engler or Life Engler? Peace Like a River, 2001.
I've been calling him Leaf. I'm told that it's probably Leif, so I'll go with that. Yeah, I wanted to include.
Go ahead.
I wanted to include a couple of 21st century novels because it's important for people to know that great literature is still being written and conservative ideas are still being explored in those novels in interesting ways. Peace Like a River is one of those novels I hadn't read until I started this project. Family members had been recommending it to me for years, and I kicked myself after I read it for taking so long. It is a wonderful novel about family, about justice, and not to sound too left-wing, but it's also an important novel about how men should behave, kind of different ways men can behave appropriately, the right balance between justice and mercy and tenderness. I quote the Harvard professor Harvey Mansfield in his book about manliness in that context. But I think conservatives love this book.
That's what struck me.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe having Harvey pop up like Agresto pops up. It's as though you know all my old friends, that you're reading people who are 35 years older than you. Let me quote what you say about the novel uses magical realism to treat the most radical elements of religious beliefs seriously. The book raises fundamental questions of religious beliefs seriously. That's not often done.
No, it's not. And great. Obviously, you don't have to be religious to be conservative, but conservatives are more likely to take religion seriously, even if they're atheists themselves. And with this, I don't know what Enger's politics are, but this struck me as such a conservative novel in some ways, just because it takes religious belief seriously. The main character, the narrator, a young boy, is convinced that his father can perform miracles. And over the course of the novel, we see a couple of those purported miracles performed. His family members are more skeptical about this, but it really does raise important questions for Christians in particular, about how we take our faith seriously, what it would mean if we witnessed a miracle, whether we would talk ourselves out of it or whether it would increase our faith somehow.
So I want to recommend to everyone to get the Engler book, Peace Like a River. My law partner, John Yeager, nagged me into reading it, and then I was so happy that I had and passed it on to many other people. I want to touch on Scoop only because it's sort of out of kilter with everything else. Scoop is funny as can be, right? It's just
Yeah.
hilarious, and it's an Englishman, it's an English journalist who is, clueless and out of his element and not doing the right thing. But you can't stop laughing, and I think it's good to laugh in a novel, and that does the job.
There's something about satire that is really conducive to great conservative writers. Christopher Buckley's, for example, Thank You for Smoking, which many of your audience may have read, or going back even further, like Jonathan Swift or the poet Alexander Pope. Conservatives love satire. And Scoop is a satire of journalism that, even though it's nearly 100 years old, still rings true. It's about the groupthink of journalists and how journalists go into the stories with basically preconceived narratives that they're duty bound to follow up on, regardless of the facts. And we've seen that way too often in the past 5 years, how that's still the case. I've spoken to many journalists who swear by this novel's accuracy.
It's pretty cynical, but it's also pretty accurate.
It is.
Let me conclude by talking to you about what C.S. Lewis called the clean breeze of centuries. And I'm sorry that hideous strength isn't anywhere in this book, because I always recommend that to young people, but it's really a young person's book. 13 novels conservatives will love. You say Lewis cited the clean breeze of centuries. So you wanted, Peace Like a River is only 25 years old, but you wanted books that had stood up to at least a little bit of time.
Yeah, I even include a novel by Christopher Beha called The Index of Self-Destructive Acts that was published in 2020. But for the most part, these are older novels that have withstood the test of time. I don't think you really need to convince conservatives that old things matter, are important. But I quoted that C.S. Lewis line because it's just such a great way of understanding that even in the present, we are subject to our own bigotries and prejudices that we don't even realize. And one of the things that immersing ourselves in the thought of the past does is help us recognize those prejudices, those blind spots, to recognize the shortcomings as well as the strengths of the past.
So, Christopher, are you happy with its reception? 13 novels conservatives will love, but probably haven't read, is published by Regnery. And you've got to work it. I don't know if anyone books novelists anymore unless they're a thriller writer, much less someone who's writing about novels. Joseph Epstein never appears because he doesn't choose to appear. What do you find to be the marketplace demand for guides to this sort of thing?
Well, I've been very pleased with the reception. I've gotten very good reviews, excellent reviews in National Review, Washington Free Beacon. Even The Economist had a really favorable review. So I've been delighted with that.
Oh.
But it is a challenge because, as you said, people aren't reading novels, and so they might be reluctant to pick up a book about novels. On the other hand, I do think people kind of recognize instinctively that they want to read more fiction, but they just don't know where to go. They don't know where to start. So I'm trying to help them out with that a little bit.
You've done a fabulous job doing that. The book is 13 novels conservatives will love, but probably haven't read. I'm not going to tell you the other 13. It's available at Amazon. It's available at Barnes & Noble. It's available in the finer bookstores of the country. And I can't recommend it highly enough. Christopher Scalia, thank you for spending time with me. And good luck on getting people back into reading. And maybe even a few English majors will come out of this. Not so sure about that, but maybe a few. Christopher, thank you.